This is episode 69 of the 1% Podcast, and today on the show we have Miss Shelley Buck and Kathy Curtis. We're going to be discussing their new book, Leave Your Light On, the musical mantra left behind by an illuminating spirit. This book details Shelley's eldest son Ryder's journey to beat cancer, only to die months later in a vehicle accident. I think our conversation really highlights the vulnerability of this subject, and I think it's something that every parent and child needs to listen to, potentially together. So go grab someone and you guys get ready for the podcast.
You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
What's going on, everybody? So good to be back with you guys. It is late September 2020. And I hope everyone's hanging in there from this crazy year we've had so far. Man, if life wasn't crazy enough, my wife decided it was time for us to get a brand new dog. So we have a 3-month-old dachshund running around the house now, chewing everything up that we've had. You know, she's went through a pair of shoes, iPhone cords, my blinds that I just installed, like all those things like that. So we're wrangling this little dachshund around every day on top of just all the crazy things that have happened so far this year. But there's something I would say kind of refreshing about having a new dog as well. Definitely gives us something to look forward to. If you guys have seen pictures on our Instagram and stuff, we have a 13-year-old dachshund as well. And we wanted to get him someone to kind of play with in his old age, but hasn't quite came around to doing that yet. Still a little ornery about the situation. But anyway, let's talk about our guests on the show today. We've got Miss Shelley Buck and Kathy Curtis, and some of you guys may not know, but Shelley is actually the wife of Frozen and Frozen 2 director Chris Buck, and their story is absolutely amazing. When their publisher reached out to me and asked me about them being on the show, I had a chance to read the book, Leave Your Light On, and absolutely had to have him on the show. After reading the book, it was interesting. I felt like I had a strong connection with Ryder, who's basically the subject of the book. And just reading his journals and all the memoirs from other people, man, I felt like I really got a chance to get to know him. And that's one of the things I liked most about the book. I got a chance to hear his thoughts, and I'd never even heard Ryder's voice before, but chance to kind of hear his thoughts and how he battled through his cancer diagnosis and leading all the way up until he passed away from a crazy accident that happened. And, it just I guess hearing firsthand his thoughts, how he processed everything, I thought it was just absolutely amazing. And I had a chance to really connect with him and everybody through the story. You guys definitely got to go check that book out. It's called Leave Your Light On. It's available on hardback, paperback, eBooks. You can go to Amazon and order it from there as well. And whenever you chance to read it, I would love to hear what you thought about it. I've left a review. I've encouraged people to go and read the reviews of the book. And when you're finished, actually leave a review yourself. I'm just loving seeing how everyone's connecting differently through Ryder's story and through the way Shelley and Kathy told the story. It's so amazing. So definitely go check it out. LeaveYourLightOnBook.com, and definitely connect with Shelley and Kathy as well too. They're 2 amazing people. And after our conversation, I knew I had 2 brand new friends all the way across the U.S. So without talking too much more about what we're going to talk about, let's jump right into our interview. Like I said earlier in the podcast, if this is, I think, a great interview for you to listen to with your children. It definitely puts some things into perspective. The vulnerability from Shelley during this interview and Kathy, it's amazing. I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had. because you never know. Our days are numbered. And the spirit that Ryder lived with, I think, is very inspiring for every child. And then just how everything was processed as well, too. Just the vulnerability, the realness, the authenticity from losing a child, I think is something that everyone needs to hear. And I'm so glad to be able to share this episode with you guys. This was a very fun episode for me. I got a little nervous, I would say, towards the part of the conversation where we did have to talk about Ryder's passing away. But I think it was so good, and I just had to ask certain questions, and they did such a wonderful job talking about everything. So not to spoil anything, but Ryder actually passed away a week before Frozen came out. So imagine, you have one of the biggest success, family success stories coming, only to lose your son the week before the release. So we talk about that during the interview as well. So I'm really excited for you guys to check it out. As always, be sure to visit 1percentpodcast.com. Go share your stories on our website. Share this podcast. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. We're out there. I love hearing the feedback. Man, I always get this surprise random feedback from people that have had a chance to listen to the show. And this is exactly what it's for, is to meet you where you are at. Each person's story will hit you in a different way. And it's probably exactly what you need to hear at the time you need to hear it. I feel like God intervenes in people's lives that way and uses our stories and struggles to help other people. Everyone's favorite character is the person with the most flaws. And everybody throughout the show has had some sort of flaw. And we talk about overcoming a lot on the show. So I'm really excited for you guys to check out this week's episode. Enjoy the show, and let us hear your feedback once it's done. Be sure to check out Leave Your Light On. Like I said, go to Amazon, purchase a copy, leave a review, and let me know what you think. So let's jump into our interview. Shelley and Kathy wrote a book called Leave Your Light On, and it's about Shelley's son, Ryder Buck, who was diagnosed with testicular cancer and then unfortunately a couple months later passed away. The book is absolutely amazing. I had a chance to read it all in the past week, and I can't wait to share their story with you guys on the 1% podcast today. So let's start off talking a little bit about Shelley and Kathy. Introduce yourselves. Miss Shelley, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Shelley Buck, and I have 3 sons. Ryder has passed about 7 years ago, not from cancer. He was in an accident. And I'm retired. I design jewelry on the side and pretty much spend my time mothering and wifing my family.
And I'm Kathy Curtis, and I'm Shelley and I met when we were 12 years old and just instantly became best friends, which we have been through life. And my life has been pretty much centered on my work, which is writing and marketing and a lot of those kind of corporate storytelling things. But I had a sideline work that I created for myself, where I helped people use creativity like writing or art or other ways of expressing really challenging things that they were going through, including cancer, including grief. It's just like across the board. And I've written my own book about how I used that to go through the grief of losing my mom from cancer. And so when Shelley decided to turn the story of Ryder's life and what happened with them into a book, it was like our friendship was there and ready to go with having a partner to help her do that. So
I think it's so amazing how, we don't know in life, we meet so many different people, right? So some people we connect with more than others. Some people end up being our best friends over time. And you never know when you make a best friend what you're going to experience in life. But I think it's so amazing how that person, I was like God knew what you needed, and then that person is part of your life when you go through those traumatic events. And here you guys are now, best friends since 12 years old, and you've had to experience so many things together. I would say good and bad, but you're here now sharing like this amazing story, and you guys co-authored the book. And I think it's absolutely amazing what you're doing. And, best friends, really hard to find, I would say. And so I'm glad to hear you guys are still friends and you guys can stay connected all this time, and have written such a wonderful book that we're going to talk about on the show today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. So to tell everyone a little bit about the book, the title of the book is called Leave Your Light On. How did you guys come up with that title?
Well, the title of the book is actually the title of the first song Ryder ever wrote. He was a musician, singer-songwriter, had his own band. And when we started off in the book, we realized that the main focus of it was going to be the light that Ryder emanated in the world. So it was a natural fit to call it Leave Your Light On.
No, I love it. And for people who haven't read the book yet, I'm going to drop links to where the book's located. You can find it on Amazon. But reading the book, what I thought was really unique about how the book was written was you really get a chance to get to know Ryder throughout the entire book. From some of the songs he's written, all the experiences that he had in life, going through his personal thoughts. Like I remember telling my wife as I was reading, I feel like I really know who Ryder is. And reading the, I guess, entries from other people talking about him as well too. What made you guys decide on picking that format to write the book?
Well, I would be happy to talk about that because, originally it was going to be kind of a retelling of the, starting with the diagnosis through the beating cancer and taking off into the world with his passion and his music and his love of people and life, and then the very tragic way in which he died so soon after that. And so we had to kind of work with the flow of the book so that we got enough of Ryder in early in the book to give you a feel for how difficult it was, but how he handled what came. He took it on. His favorite word was chill. He always telling his mom to chill, mom, and he did. He brought that into at 22 years old, being diagnosed and just kind of sidelining his life for a long time. But then, what he did with that light, it was just, we wanted to pace it so that you've got to feel for the difficulty and the pain, but more than ever, more than anything, you've got to feel for the light inside the young man whose journey that was. So,
Shelley, what inspired you to take Ryder's story to turn it into a book to tell everyone?
Well, as Kathy said, I started with a journal when he was first diagnosed with cancer, and it was a public journal on CaringBridge where I could keep everybody up to speed on his path and on my path. It was very, very good for me. And several people said, Shelley, you've got to turn this into a book. And, I said, well, yeah, kind of modestly, yeah, I don't think so. Right. But then after Ryder passed, he sent me a message, Mom, write my story, tell my story. And he said, you can do it. I'll be with you. And that was the catalyst that launched the whole thing. I mean, I couldn't turn him down. So off we went.
So being able to share something like this with the entire world definitely dives into the vulnerability category in your life, I would say. Did you have moments where you once you've kind of got that message that you maybe questioned it and decided to do it or not to do it, or did you know right then that you had to put this out?
I knew right then I had to put it out. There were, of course, stumbling blocks along the way. I mean, the first person we consulted, or that I consulted, said, you've got to take this out of journal form and put it into narrative. You need a ghostwriter, someone to partner with. And I was at a loss, and called Kathy to bounce it off of her. And we eventually came to terms with the fact that the best match would obviously be her to partner with me. And then we found a publishing company, and, we started through the process.
Gotcha. Well, let's tell everyone a little bit about Ryder's story. So, growing up, Ryder just really got heavy into music. I feel like that was his way of expressing his creativity, and the band that he had and all the people that he had a chance to meet. Tell us a little bit about Ryder growing up and what it was like to be his mom.
Well, he was a very chill character from the very beginning. I mean, I would greet him in his crib with my exuberant good morning, and he would recoil like, "Mom, chill." And he didn't even know the word yet. But he started right out teaching me to take a step back, take it easy, and treat him with giving him the space he needed to be himself, rather than drag him into my whirlwind of a world. He taught me, and still does teach me, to just chill out. So growing up, he was sensitive, he was self-contained, he was intuitive. I called him an old soul from the time he was little. And he was a seeker. He was a spiritual seeker as he got older. He was studying all the teachers and masters of different religions and cultures, and his cancer diagnosis really launched him into that in an even deeper level.
So how old was Ryder when he was diagnosed with cancer?
He was 22.
And tell us about how that happened. I know in the book he talked about how, was he way at college, and that how he found out? Or
no, he was at home in college, and he called and said, "Mom, I've got good news and bad news." And I said, "Well, give me the bad news." He said, "I've got cancer." And I was like blown away. I mean, I dropped my paintbrush, and I wanted to talk to his doctor, and he was, too busy to get permission from the doctor or for the doctor. And I was beside myself. And what else did you ask me?
I was asking, like, when he was diagnosed, like, where was he at, or how did you guys find out?
Oh, he went to the doctor for just a regular checkup, and the doctor found some firmness in his testicle and said, "We need to check this." And they went straight in for an ultrasound. And then within a week, he had his surgery. And then within another couple weeks, he was in chemo.
So he was living at home at the time that he found out he had cancer?
Yes, he was.
So once you got that news, obviously I remember telling my mom the same thing when I had cancer. It's like, it's that the grief cycle starts there, right? You're in disbelief. You don't know what to think. You have a million questions. You want to find out all the answers to that. How was his response to your response when you found out he had cancer?
Oh, he tried to chill me out. He was ready to take the steps one at a time as prescribed, and really wanted me to just calm down and take it one step at a time with him. Of course, I went right into research mode, and I always had my iPad with me when we were in the hospital, and I was there with him every day. He was inpatient, and I did endless research, and we cleared the house of all the toxins, and we washed the dogs, and we filled the refrigerator with the best possible food. And he would go out and get junk food and bring it home. He insisted on the healthy food, but then he would do it his way. And I had to just sit back and go with the flow.
Was that hard for you to see, like, you were preparing everything to be absolutely perfect, to give him every opportunity to have everything that he needed, and then he would decide to do something completely on his own?
Oh, absolutely. And he did more than that. He went in between chemo treatments. He would have 1 week inpatient and 2 weeks out. And as soon as he felt well enough, he was off and running, and sometimes out all night, he'd go to the beach, he'd go to the mountains, he'd go up the coast to a concert, Dodger Stadium, all sorts of places that just made my skin crawl. And, but he was doing it his way. So the doctor said, you need to let him be a man. And that became my mantra. And I tried to remind myself of that constantly, that I needed to let him take the wheel. He was, 22 years old, and he was at the mercy of the doctors and nurses and really needed to have some kind of control in his life. I mean, he was ready to launch into adulthood, and suddenly he was tethered to his mother and a hospital bed. And so we had to find our way through that. And it took a lot of restraint on my part.
So whenever you go into a battle like cancer, you go into it with the weapons that you have, but you also pick up some along the way. You said he started going through cancer and he hit it head on, basically. Do you feel like that was a learned behavior maybe he had picked up from someone in your family, or if he was just always kind of built to face challenges like that?
Well, I'll take some credit, just for the way I attack life. But he was the calm spirit that was going to just take hold and do what was necessary. I think, he saw both his father and I go through life with a tenacity that I think he absolutely got, whether it came just from him or both from him and the example we set.
And Kathy, as you got a chance to know Ryder, what kind of traits did you see in him that you knew, like, once he got diagnosed with cancer, he was going to be able to do his absolute best to, I would say, more mentally and emotionally go through this in a positive and healthy way?
I don't think I knew that. I don't know that that was a given in my mind, but because I had been, I've been in California visiting them when he was doing some really dumb stuff when he was a teenager, just typical stuff. And I showed up one time and he had just been grounded for something. And so I always had this sort of sense of humor about him. I knew what he had been like when he came into life. I know that serenity that he had about him, which was a remarkable quality for a little baby boy. But it felt to me, honestly, like a work in progress, the way really life is anyway. But I knew Shelley well enough to know she would be inclined to hover and make him want to, and I knew he had this indomitable spirit, and how would that play out? And I, looking back, 2020 vision, I really think his indomitable spirit is what helped him to overcome and beat cancer. I mean, really, I know I give everyone in the scenario a lot of credit, but I give Ryder the ultimate credit for saying, I need to go take a hike in the mountains right now. I need to play my guitar out under the stars, even though I'm hooked up to chemo. Those are the kind of things that I really feel he intuitively knew he had to keep that reservoir full in order for him to deal with the effects of chemo and, all about that, just how I haven't been through it, but I mean, it has to be really hard.
One of the big things we encourage for everyone is self-advocacy. And, being a younger cancer patient, it's hard because you're looking to all these people for answers, and you might not know exactly what to do. But what I thought was so great about what he talked about, in his journal was, those moments where he had to go out and get a clear mind, or when he, disobeyed a doctor's orders or something like that. He just needed his moment to really collect his thoughts and prepare for the next steps going forward, which I thought was pretty brave for someone at such a young age to really, take that kind of advocacy and really go after that themselves. And
I agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, he amazed me. The way he went through it, the positive way he went through it. We never talked about the possibility of death.
Mhm.
He didn't entertain the idea because it wasn't on his radar. He was absolutely going to heal, and he did everything possible to keep himself on that path, including pretty much following doctor's orders. I mean, he did some unadvised things, but he did what he was supposed to do as far as showing up mostly on time,
Right.
not always at the hospital, but and he did go MIA once, just because they surprised him saying he needed a transfusion, and he had no intention of being poked on that day. So he left the hospital. It was the only time I ever let him drive himself. And he just got on the road and came home. And they called me and said, we're afraid he's going to bleed out. We really need him back here. And he showed up all smiles and happy. And, I'll go in next week if I need to. And they were warning me that, it could happen overnight in his bed.
Mhm.
And oh God, that was probably my lowest point during his chemo.
Hmm. Let's talk about your family for a second. When Ryder was diagnosed with cancer, um, there's never a convenient time to get that news. I would say that someone has cancer in the family. How did your husband respond, and how did Ryder's siblings respond to that?
Well, my husband was working overtime on Frozen, the first one, and 7 days a week and late into the evening. And he took it in stride, as he does with everything. I mean, he's a very, very calm character. So, I was full charge, full steam ahead, doing all the research, and he kind of let me do that. Um, he didn't have the time to do it, but I reached out to my friends and got great recommendations for doctors and hospitals. And then my second son, Woody, was away at college at the University of Michigan. So he didn't know what that meant. He
Mhm.
thought Ryder could die, and he was derailed. He had a hard time getting through his auditions. He's in musical theater. I think I said that. And so he was tearful for a long time. And then his youngest brother, Reed, was worried sick. He's more like I am. And he thought Ryder was going to die on the operating table. And I didn't know that for a couple of months after. And when he finally came out with it. So he was, his boat was rocked in a more visible way. And he took a back seat, but he also needed me. He was a teenager in high school, and he needed my attention. So he kind of acted out and was more demanding when I was available. He needed more. So that was his response to it, was to try to steal the limelight a little bit.
I tell everyone that going through the cancer journey, if it's you, it's almost easier if it's you, but it's harder if you're watching someone else go through it, because there's this lack of control that, we all like to try to be in control as much as we possibly can, especially if it's someone that we love, to take care of them. But the lack of control sometimes can drive you a little mad. And, the moments where you just worry and you wish there was something else you could do. And a lot of times these moments happen at night, when your head on the pillow and you're laying there and you can't get something out of your mind, or you're worried, or you're concerned. Did you ever have moments where you just had those overwhelming thoughts of how is this going to turn out, and is he going to be okay, and all those thoughts and questions.
Of course I did. And usually in the quiet moments, I had quiet moments at the hospital where I would sometimes leave his room and just meditate on the possibilities. I, again, didn't really entertain the idea of his death, but we had to look at it as a possibility. I did. Of course, I wanted to change places with him. I watched him be poked. He never got a PICC line, so it was constant needles, and eventually his veins collapsed, and it was excruciating to stand by. There were a lot of tears. It's bringing them up now. Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to jump in here. I remember when we were putting the book together, and we had, Ryder's cancer journal entries. We had entries from other people, and we were trying to weave them in to help support, just this idea of getting to know Ryder and feeling that light. And the one, one of the things he wrote about that moved me so much was the way that he had a friend who came to visit him in the hospital, and the friend treated him like nothing was any different than normal, and just allowed him to be Ryder, not Ryder with cancer, and everyone else was tiptoeing and, treating him like he was fragile. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they're doing that when because cancer is a scary word. I mean, we all know the fear that immediately comes up, but I love that part of the book because I hope even just that one little journal entry can make a difference for someone who's either going through it or has a family member that they'll think about that a little bit.
Yeah, Ryder said no sad eyes. He didn't want anybody's pity. He just wanted to be treated like he would be treated on the street any other day of his life.
And I'm just coming from the personal experience myself, is if someone is showing so much pity on them, you automatically have to take your energy and try to make them feel better. But if they don't treat you that way, that gives that, because you only have a certain amount of, you're fighting every day, whether it's mentally or emotionally or physically, for your life. And if you don't have to use that energy for someone else, I think that's something that everyone needs to know when someone is diagnosed with cancer. It's how it can affect you, but it needs to affect you privately, maybe off to the side, but in front of that person, you need to encourage them and be strong and get in the trenches with them. And they shouldn't have to worry about consoling you as much, I would say. That's a thought that I had as well too. I remember I just purchased my first home here in Atlanta, and I was lying in bed at night, and I was thinking, if I die from this, I had lost a brother several years before. I was like, my mother is going to have 2 children that she's lost. And that, the thought of that was worse than any kind of any portion of going through cancer for me, because I thought about, she's going to have to lose another child. And I know what the first one, how bad it was for the first one. And I didn't want her to have to experience that. So that was a source of strength for me as well too, was like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can possibly do, because we have a limited, scope. Lots of times when you have cancer, sometimes you're just at the mercy of the medicine in a way. It works for some people, it doesn't work for others. There's no reason why we know sometimes that whether 2 people with the exact same diagnosis, I'll use Chadwick Boseman as an example. He and I had the exact same cancer, same stage, everything. One of us made it, one of us didn't. And it's something that, it's so hard to explain, but while you're going through it, I think it opens your mind up to all these other possibilities and curiosities that you have. For me, I know my faith was really important for me going through that. That was my main source of strength. And reading through Ryder's journals as well too, it sounds like he was, he had those like moments where he started really getting into the spiritual side of his life. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? Like how you saw that progress through his cancer diagnosis?
Well, he dove in immediately. I mean, he was already a spiritual seeker. That was just how he was made, and that was where he was at that point in his life. But he took a dozen books with him to the hospital, some on writing lyrics, but mostly, Buddha or some other inspirational writer or teacher. And he dove right into that and came out so much more serene than he had been going in. And he was already, as we've said, a very calm character. The summer after he was cleared, he took a world music class in Bali, and that he plugged into the culture and the faith system there, and came home even more calm and serene and spiritual. And he started having lunches with a friend who studied the spiritual masters, and they would discuss things on a weekly basis. And she ended up saying, she was my age, she ended up saying, Ryder is teaching me. My faith, and she was raised Catholic, my faith is pales compared to where he's at. So he was really, really working at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was amazing. I thought that just listening, I feel like I could hear Ryder saying everything that was on the page. Just reading his journals about how you could see it progressing as well too. Like he would, it's like one thought led to the other, which helped give him a little more clarity in his journey that he was looking at. And I could tell he got a lot of peace from that. And I think that's so important. We have so much, like I said, we have so much control over, our lives in a way. And always feel like, we have a responsibility for what we have control over, but everything else, for me, it's like, that's where God comes in. Cause I don't know, I don't know. I can only see so far ahead of me. But after that, things are kind of laid out in your path and stuff. And that's one great thing about having great relationships or establishing relationships is you never know when you're going to need someone you met for a certain reason. It's the whole reason, season, lifetime people have friendships. So as Ryder started going through chemo and all that, you saw the ups and downs with that. Let's talk about him finishing. I know you guys have been there when you go for those scans where you're just, you're hoping and praying that you're going to get those clear scans every time. When you guys started getting to that point of his journey, how was that? Did you have a lot of anxiety every time that you went in and to get those results?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There were so many tests and so many scans. And because he went in with stage 4 cancer, it was already in his lungs, mm-hmm. and they were concerned about his lymph nodes. We were watching every single scan. The brain scans came up. I mean, after his transfusion, he had to have more brain scans. They wanted to make sure that he was, that nothing had happened. Mm-hmm. He had a period of time where they thought he was clear after 3 rounds of chemo. And so we had a break over the holidays and then just happened to go back to our internist who did a full panel of tests and found that the cancer markers were up again. So instead of waiting until March, he was back in chemo in January. So there were another battery of tests, and I held my breath every time. He went in there with a bravado and a confidence that stunned me, but it also carried me.
What would you say you learned through that? Did you feel like this, I know it's your child, but do you like the worry and the anxiety, do you feel like over time, did it get better, or every time was it about the same when you went in to get the results?
I had confidence in the protocol and the doctor, and he had confidence that this was going to be okay. So I hung on that. Um, Going in, it was always with trepidation, but because things were getting better, I went in with more peace as we progressed through the treatment. And the final scans came in. He was cleared. The doctor did one more round. He did a seventh round, and he said it was just for insurance. I never told Ryder that, or he never would have shown up for it. But we did the one more round, and then he was cleared, and we were jubilant. I mean, we just practically danced all the way home on the LA freeways. And he never got to his second round of tests because he was going to go back in 6 months, and he passed away before that appointment.
So as you guys got the good results, you were happy coming home. Did you get a little sense of relief that you guys had been through, the tail end of going through cancer, like the very end stages are some of the roughest sometimes, but also that breath of air where you know that you don't have to go back for another round of treatment.
Yeah.
What did you guys do to celebrate that?
Well, we went out to his favorite restaurant. I got a great big burger, and I cried. I mean, I cried. I could hardly drive home. I was so elated. And he was just saying, "I told you so, Mom. I told you so." I was like, okay, I'll take it. Whatever you want to say. But yeah, we went out as a family and celebrated, and of course called everyone. And he took off. He took off spending his time away from home, and it was a little bit of a storm at our house. I mean, with my younger son's energy and my energy, even though I was learning to calm down, it was still a storm. And I could see that it rankered Ryder when he would come in from the beach or the mountaintop, where he spent a lot of time with his guitar, that it just irritated him. And he and his younger brother would poke at each other, and he would take off again. And I understood it, but it hurt. I really wanted him around, not flat out on the couch with the barf bucket beside him, right, but just around where we could celebrate together.
Mm-hmm. And Kathy, you being Shelley's friend, when you got the news that, Ryder was cleared, didn't have to go take any more treatments, how did you feel about that situation, knowing that you kind of watching it from afar?
Well, I mean, it was huge relief. And I felt like Ryder was ready to fly. He'd been like gathering wisdom and gathering energy and putting so much joy and love into the world. And it was just like this package of a human being that was so big and so ready. I just think I was like, well, wonder what he'll do now, and knowing that it would be big and great, whatever it was. But yeah, and I was so relieved for Shelley. Oh my gosh. I mean, it was just hard as you can't imagine, truthfully, what you haven't been through. And I mean, I'm good at imagining things with other people, but I just remember thinking, I just can't even fathom what all that woman has had to face and deal with. But if anybody could, it was Shelley Buck.
I remember being lost in my house. I mean, I couldn't focus. I couldn't put one foot in front of the other for at least a couple of weeks, because it was done, and that part of my life was over. And now, not a short leash, but no leash on Ryder, and I just had to support that. So it was a major change from being with him, every day for 5 days, and then, hovering over him for the 2 weeks that he was home. We were connected at the hip, and to have it all be over, I mean, of course I was relieved, I was elated, but I was a rudderless ship for a good long while.
It's funny. So I'm 39 years old, and I'm going to, every time I go visit my mother, I, as a man, you want to always do things for yourself. But now I know, going back and seeing her, I need to let her cook dinner. I need to let her do this, let her check the boxes of all the things that a mother would do. Not because she has to do it, but I think she just really wants to do it. And, it just makes me think about what you just said about him being home. He sounds like you try to take advantage of every single moment that you had with him, to do the things that you wanted to do, just because, in his mind, hey, I just beat this, I'm going 90 miles an hour towards the right to whatever I want to do in life. But for you, it's probably different. You want to squeeze him a little tighter, probably because you've had such a traumatic experience so far. As I, knowing the outcome of the book going into it, as I kept reading and reading and reading, a part of me was getting anxious to get to the point that I want to discuss with you guys right now. As I kept reading, I was like, when are we, when is this traumatic, event going to happen? And I remember, like, as I got to that point in the book, just reading, how, Ryder was out late one night, it sounds like, and you had said something about, you never turn the ringer off on your phone, and the ringer was off on your phone that night, where he had ran out of gas, I think, right on the freeway.
No, he was his car had broken down,
okay.
So it wasn't just gas. He had 2 flat tires, and he pulled off to the side of the road and then started walking.
Yeah, so he was out there. It was almost 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and unfortunately, Ryder was struck by 2 cars at the time and passed away. And you talk about how you got, was it the police came to your door, basically, and what that experience was like, and having a personal connection to that, to losing a family member as well. That moment when the doorbell rang and the police were standing in front of you, is that, I'm sure there was a million things that you thought they were going to say, obviously, before what they said. What was your reaction like when you got probably the worst news of your life?
Well, the police didn't give it to me. They came to the door and asked if Ryder lived there, and I said yes, thinking, okay, he's in jail. Mm-hmm. And they said, no, he's in the ICU at the local hospital, and they were to take me there. So the only person home was Reed, my youngest son, and I got him out of bed. It was early in the morning, and we went to the hospital, where we waited 2 hours before the surgeon came in and gave us the news. And he gave it to me slowly. He told me all the ways Ryder was injured, and I kept thinking, okay, well, that will heal. Okay, we can fix that. Okay, he'll be able to play his guitar again. And then he dropped the bomb, and I fell apart, of course. Mm-hmm. And my son, poor thing, he couldn't even hear the words, but he knew he had to be there for me. My husband was in New York. My other son was in Michigan. And Reed, at 15, had to be the man that held me together. Mm-hmm. That was that experience. I had to call my husband from the hospital. And I was foolish enough to say, I couldn't say Ryder's dead. I couldn't get the word out of my mouth, dead. So I said, Ryder's gone. And he said, well, gone where? He'll be back, kind of a thing. And I had to say, no, he's dead. And I said, you can stay there and finish your press. And he was like, are you kidding me?
Right.
I can't stay here. I was out of my mind. I had no grasp on reality at that point. And we had some friends there with us who were going to drive us home. So I wasn't alone with Reed, but yeah, that started the day from hell.
Yeah. Yeah, you talked about in the book how when Chris got the news that you wanted someone to be with him, and then he immediately flew back after everything. When he first got home and you guys saw each other for the first time, what was that embrace like? As a married couple losing your child, what was that like when you guys first saw each other?
Well, the house was full of people already, but he hadn't cried yet. So it was just, I collapsed into his arms and he was consoling me as much as he needed it himself. He was trying to hold me together. And then we got busy with all the people that showed up. I mean, people came with food that day. People came to just be with us. Band members and their families came, neighbors, friends, and very quickly Chris's whole family was on flights to get here. My family was at the house. So it was a busy scene. And we had to busy ourselves with everybody until the house was empty, and then we just sat. And I cried constantly.
Mm-hmm. When did Chris finally let go of the emotions? That wasn't everyone left the house, or did he have his own private time for that?
It took him a day, or maybe that night. I think he went into Ryder's room to try to be close to him, and I think he finally cried then. Mm-hmm. So that was a good 12 or 18 hours after he got the news. Mm-hmm. But then very soon after that, I needed people around me. I definitely needed people around me. But right after the service, Chris asked if it would be okay if he just drove up the coast and was by himself for a while. Mm-hmm. And, of course I said yes. And that was where he got in touch with Ryder, and he felt at peace.
Mm-hmm. And Kathy, when you got the news, what went through your head whenever you got this terrible news?
Well, I don't even feel like I could think. It was the big shock. It was beyond shocking, and I didn't even know what to say, which I think is just one of the really sad parts of being, human. We just don't know what to say in that moment. But I knew what a deep connection Shelley and Ryder had. She calls it soulmates, and I always really understood that, because it wasn't like they were exactly alike and they thought exactly alike or anything like that, but it was just a profound connection. And what's so, weird for me is that I had been working with people going through grief for several years at that point. And I felt completely incompetent and incapable of being in that mode, because I was grieving too. Mm-hmm. And it was very complicated. And I waited to go out there until the holidays, because I knew they were coming up, and it would be, oh my gosh, just a really challenging first, Christmas, and they do it so big in the Buck household anyway. And when I got out there, I kind of got in touch with how each family member was coping in a different way. And I don't know. It's like I held it all back until I got out there. But yeah, it's just hard to articulate a shock that big.
It is. When you have a personal connection, it hits a little different, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Just having this conversation, and I, Shelley, thank you for having this conversation. I know it's not an easy one to have, but I think it's a powerful conversation because it lets people know that they're not alone. People that have lost someone, lost a child. I've talked to hundreds of people, thousands of people probably, that have, passed away eventually from cancer, and or husbands, wives who have lost someone to cancer as well too. And there's a common theme that I see with everyone. And there's a lady that I interviewed 2 years ago, and she said something that's always stuck with me ever since. And she was diagnosed with a terminal form of colon cancer, and she took over 150 chemo treatments. That lets you know how awful that was. Was newly divorced, had 2 young children, basically had to see her go through that her whole life. And she told me, she said, Truett, I don't worry about how long I'm going to live, because this is probably what's going to take me out. She's like, I worry about how, deep and wide I can live my life every day. And she unfortunately passed away in the past couple of months, but her legacy is so similar to everyone else who I've seen. People that live, it sounded like Ryder was the same way. He lived such a full and a deep and like a inspirational life. And you also, sometimes you always wonder, like, why was it that person that lived such a wonderful life? Not that everybody else doesn't, or to offend anyone with that, but why is it the person who enjoyed life so much, the person who had a shorter life sometimes? And those are some of the questions that I see people asking themselves after the fact. Like, this person really, had so much going for them in their life, and they were so positive. Why was it them over, someone else? And obviously this is a very, this was as an accidental type thing that happened to Ryder. But did you have those moments, or do you still have those moments where you wonder, like, why this happened? Why your son, or why these circumstances, are in your family?
Well, I'll tell you, Truett, very early on, I realized that the question why and what if just took me on a straight path to desperation.
Right.
And I had to stop asking those questions. I had to ask what now, and put one foot in front of the other. And I did ask why for a while, and I railed at God. I was furious with God, and it took me a long time to get any kind of a relationship back. But why became a torturous question for me. And so as soon as I could, I let that one go.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. Again, I even said it to myself, and I think that's a very common question, and a very, I don't know, appropriate question to ask, I think, in a lot of ways, is why, because it doesn't make sense. And I think that's a good question for God as well too, because we don't understand, the circumstance. And some people would probably shy away from, I don't know. It's all about your relationship, right? Like your relationship with God. And if you're going to have any kind of relationship, there's going to be tensions and moments where you don't understand why certain things happen. I think that's part of the growth in your spiritual journey. What advice would you have for someone out there, maybe that's listening to the show at the moment, who's, unfortunately lost someone close to them, that you could share that would, kind of help them through those rough moments of, first losing someone close to them?
I'll tell you what got me from day to day was feeling Ryder's light and getting in touch with him. I meditated, I reached out to him, I asked him for signs. We got signs. We got so many signs from him. And I even went to a medium several times because she always got messages from Ryder in ways that were undeniably Ryderisms. And that helped me. But being in touch with him was the most important thing for me. And I would look at his videos of his gigs. I blew up his pictures and put them on the wall. I spent countless months sleeping in his bed, just trying to keep that connection. And I feel like I have it today, and it's been almost 7 years, but I feel like I can call on him and feel his presence, and he still affects my life.
Mm. After being in his room, I remember my mother saying that at a certain point in time, like, my brother's clothes stopped smelling like him. And that was a real sad moment for her. Was there a point at a certain time where you stopped doing that because it just, you felt like you got as much as you could and you were on to the next part of the grief cycle that really kind of got you through the other steps?
Well, when we finally had to wash the sheets, they did stop smelling like him, and I still slept there for a good long time. We just cleaned out most of the things in his closet. We kept the things that I remember him wearing. But I mean, it's been almost 7 years, and we are just culling through a few things. Now, I've kept his room the way he left it. Excuse me. And yeah, I did finally go back into my own bed because I slept better there. And, you know, my husband was in there too. So I don't remember the timing, but it took me months.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that up because there's no timetable on grief. Like it's not something that you just get over. It takes a significant amount of time, and every day it's little moments that give you a little bit more peace as you go along the way.
Right. It's a healing process. It's not some place you get to. You know, I don't think there'll ever be an end to the healing process, but I'm taking all the steps I possibly can to continue it.
Which I think is great. And I think that's one great thing about you putting this book out as well too, because I'm sure during the process of getting this message out to everyone, there's been some healing that's probably taken place in your life. Would you say that's a true statement?
Oh, absolutely. Every step we've taken, from producing his CDs to the bench we put on the mountaintop to the scholarship we set up in his name at the high school, all of these things were concrete steps that helped me, but especially the book, because that was going through everything and going through it with a dear, trusted friend who I could unload on. Mm-hmm. And we sorted through it and put it back together in a meaningful way, in a way that I believe will touch and affect people and hopefully help people. Some of the feedback we've gotten already has said that it's definitely helped people. So that's my greatest hope for it.
And just to kind of timestamp this a little bit, like, all of this happened during one of the most probably successful moments your family was having career-wise, correct?
Right. Yeah. Frozen came out exactly a month to the day after Ryder passed. And of course there was There was press before the release. There was press after the release. There were parties, endless parties. There were the Oscars where they won. And I actually had to put it together enough to go to the Oscars with my husband in March. So that was just a few months later. But for him, it was a roller coaster of being consoled and congratulated in the same breath. And it was exhausting, and he would come home just spent. And you know, he had to soldier up and do and walk through it. I mean, it was a culmination of 6 years of work for him, and he knew Ryder would want him to go and enjoy as much as possible the accolades and the success of the film. And so that's what he did.
And you guys have been married how long?
30 years. It'll be 31 in December.
31 years, which is amazing. Without getting too personal, going through this event in your marriage, you know, obviously that's a big stressor and a big strain and stuff. What would you say is one thing that you learned about maybe your husband that you didn't know before as you guys went through this traumatic experience?
I learned that he is more self-contained than I ever realized. He is a very, very calm character, and he processed the whole thing from the cancer through Ryder's death and passing and on into the following years pretty much on his own. We didn't have a lot of deep conversations about it, maybe a few, you know, where I would say, I really miss him. Mm-hmm. And then we talk about it a little bit, but Chris was unto himself as far as the processing part went. And I was expressive and needed to talk about Ryder and talk with friends and write about him. And, you know, Chris was along for the ride. I mean, he wasn't disengaged, but he was self-contained.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys probably had like a balance from that.
Right.
Which I think is good. And that's what all successful relationships have is that balance of, you know, calmness and anxiety on different subjects all along the way and stuff. So the reason I asked you that was I wanted everyone to know that, you know, if you're going through this type of situation and you have a spouse who may be responding different than you are, that's completely okay. And just as long as you guys are supporting each other through the process, like through the ups and downs, whether it's, you know, the self-containment side or if it's the, you know, very emotional side of it, you know, you still don't lose sight of each other in your relationship. I know you guys have 2 other children and careers and everything else that you're focusing on as well too. So I think it's important to put out there for everyone listening right now that, you know, support your spouse or whoever you're with as they go through this, and know that they may respond a little bit different. But that's the way grief works. Everyone, you know, there's a different recipe for success for everyone. So.
Right. Absolutely.
So there was some, you know, towards the end of the book, there's a lot of stories from other people about Ryder. And there's one story in particular that I thought was absolutely amazing. And if this doesn't let you know that there's somebody out there or something out there that's bigger than all of us, then I don't know what is. It's the ukulele story. That to me, when I read that, I was just blown away. And I was telling my wife about it. I was like, listen to this story. And the person that wrote you the email was actually from Atlanta at St. I don't know why.
Right. And I don't know how he found me, you know, email, the whole 9 yards.
Do you mind sharing a little bit of that story with everyone?
Well, I don't know where to begin. I got an email from a man who was a professor in Atlanta who had just been to, I think it was over the holidays of 2013. He had just been to Hawaii with a friend, and they saw a ukulele down in the bottom of the ocean in a lagoon, and they went down and they got it. they pulled it out, and it had papers in it, and it was a love letter from Ryder's last girlfriend, or one of his girlfriends, and with pictures of them. And he got in touch with me. He researched Ryder on different music sites and finally found a picture match and where he lived. And he reached out to me in this email and told me this story, which blew me away. But the amazing thing was, this girlfriend had been over just a couple of weeks prior and shown me a video of her stuffing the ukulele with these letters and pictures and throwing it into the ocean at dawn, just as her tribute to Ryder. So putting those two stories together was one of those miraculous things. I mean, this man looked up Ryder's music online and really liked it and was just lovely.
Yeah, that story was wow, like blew me away. I was like, what? And if that's not a sign, obviously, that I'm sure when you got the news and you got the email, like it hit you a different way, that you just probably maybe needed to hear that at that moment and stuff, which is always what I feel like is God looking out for us and giving us exactly what we need when we don't even need it sometimes. But yeah, that was an amazing story. I'm so glad you guys put that in the book. The book, to me, was I felt like I've never heard Ryder's voice before until I saw his music, but like listening to him talk through the whole process and watching him from the cancer, from the pre-cancer to the cancer diagnosis, into all the letters and stuff people wrote about him. And then the way you guys told the story, which I think is absolutely wonderful. I really got a chance to know him. And for me, like having that small relationship, I would say, with him just through your book, really, for me, it gives me a different perspective sometimes, because I've been around a bunch of people who've had, traumatic events happen in their life, and I've had my own, but every story is unique and every story teaches me something as well too. And so just seeing that, through your book, I think you guys both did an amazing job with that. And I can't wait for everyone to check out the book and really get a chance to know Ryder and celebrate his life. And if you want to tell people what's the best way maybe to connect with you and to find the book online and where to order it, I think that'd be great. I think everybody wants to hear that.
Well, one of the best ways to connect, the best way to connect with me is through Ryder's website, which is ryderbuckmusic.com, and his name is spelled R-Y-D-E-R. And there's a contact page there. There's a media page where we list all of our links to our podcasts, and you'll be up there. And there's a link to the book, which is the landing page. So you'll get to the first page of the website, and you can link directly to, I think it's just Amazon, but you can also get the book at Barnes & Noble and other booksellers. Or you can just go straight to Amazon and put in Leave Your Light On. And we also have leaveyourlightonbook.com, which is solely for the book, and it has a little bit of a description and some reviews.
That's perfect. So everyone listening, I'll drop those links in the show notes. You guys can check out ryderbuckmusic.com and leaveyourlightonbook.com. Go to Amazon, purchase the book. You won't be disappointed. It's a great short read, I would say. It's something you can read over 3 or 4 days. And it's a very personal connection that you're going to be able to have with Ryder, and see if you want to go check out Ryder's music as well too. I think that'd be a great, cap to the story as far as that goes. Well, Kathy and Shelley, I appreciate you guys being on the show. Thank you for being vulnerable. I know, there's moments that are very tough to talk about. And I think you guys both did a great job going through that. I like to always acknowledge everyone at the end of the show. And it's never easy to share some of the most personal moments of your life, no matter whether it's losing someone to cancer or losing a child. Those moments of grief, again, like I mentioned earlier, this was in one of the biggest moments of your family's life, Shelley, that you guys were going through, that you lost your child. And I think it's amazing what you've done, and every step that you've taken to get to where you are right now is such a valuable thing. And it seems like you've really embraced the fact that Ryder, just the title of the book, that he's leaving a light on for so many other people out there. And so even though he's not physically here with us, like, his music and his words, his legacy will just travel on forever. And, going through the ups and downs of writing a book and producing, all the media and stuff for it, there's a lot that goes through that. So a lot of endurance, I think, that needs to happen on your end, getting asked these questions and reliving the situation every time you have an interview with someone, can really take its toll sometimes as well too. But I think you did an amazing job, and really looking forward to seeing this book do well. And Kathy, for you, just, acknowledge you for, being Shelley's friend for so many years, and watching her go through this and helping her write the book and really putting it all together. I think this was, again, just a divine plan for you guys to have this book put out together. And I'm so glad that it's worked out. And I can't wait for everyone to get a copy of the book and give you guys some great feedback.
Yeah, we really look forward to the reviews on Amazon. That helps reach more people. So that's a great thing people can do once they read the book.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Well, this concludes our interview with Miss Shelley and Kathy on today's episode of the 1% Podcast. Be sure to check out 1%podcast.com. If you have anyone that's interested in being on the show, we have a link to sign up on as well too for that. Check out all of our social media pages on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere you can get your podcasts. The podcast is produced there. So again, Kathy, Shelley, thank you guys so much for being on the show today. I appreciate everything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.